What's up, everybody, and happy Halloween.
Wow, that was unexpected.
Yeah, I'm trying to be spooky. Jump scares.
I mean, you startled me. I'm now sitting here with soiled underpants, and I've got you to thank for that. So, yay!
I didn't know I was that good at Halloweening.
Well, I think it's more that I wasn't expecting your little outburst there, and I thought that there was a goblin in my ear. And now I'm sitting in a puddle of urine, recording a podcast.
So now you guys know if we ever do like a meet and greet type of situation,
that like I'm likely sitting in urine at that point as well. So, come say hi. Let's shake hands. It's a little urine between friends.
I was going to say randomly yell while you're talking to him, but yeah, he's just going to piss his pants.
Yeah, I mean, if you want more piss than is already there, then yeah, definitely just like jump at me or, look at me weird. I'm like a fucking deer, man. I'm more likely to bolt than anything, but I'll trail pee while I bolt. It's in my nature, damn it.
Well, for the Halloween episode this year, we've decided to dive a little bit into our old school roots somewhat and cover some of the scariest SCPs we could find.
And we don't want to just do like a file reading. Like we wanted something with some substance to it. So we combed the depths of the SCP website and found what we thought are some of the creepiest. And there's probably some nerds out there that are like, that's actually not the creepiest. The creepiest is blah, blah. And you're probably right, and we just don't know about it. So if you've got one that's creepier, please send it to us so that we can, do fun things with it. Unless we've already did, because for some of you new listeners, you might not be aware we used to do a bunch of SCP readings over on our YouTube page, but we haven't done that in several years now. But if you're interested, if you enjoy this sort of thing, and you want to hear some of the old stuff we did with it, I believe there's a playlist on our YouTube page if you go there.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes for this episode. There's a crap ton of them. I wasn't aware we did that many.
I know. I forgot how many we actually. And then I'm looking through them. I'm like, what the fuck even is this thing? And then I listen to it. I'm like, that's my voice, but I have no recollection of this whatsoever.
Yeah, you've mentioned like doing that with episodes of the show, and I haven't gotten to that point yet. But with the SCPs, I definitely listened to a few to where I was like,
SCPs,
what the fuck?
Like the one about the fucking car that is prone to exploding or crashing or whatever.
Yeah.
Totally forgot that existed and that I did it. And I saw it on there because I wanted to look at what we've already done, because I've got a notoriously horrible memory. So it would be my luck that I would just be recording something I already did. So I had to go through and look, and man, yeah, I forgot how many we did. It's crazy. There's a lot. So if you like this sort of thing, go check that out. For anyone who's joining us this year, we typically for Halloween we'll do scary stories or something, or something related to spooky scary somethings. I don't know, but last week we covered a horror movie, and this week is scary story time. So I guess get out your Halloween candy and hang out and listen to us bullshit our way through some stories. And I hope you guys like it. We have a lot of fun doing this. If you guys want to see, or well, I guess not see, but if you guys want to hear more of this type of thing, let us know and we'll put it up on, we'll maybe start bringing it back to YouTube if there's enough interest. But if there's not, there's this, and there's our old shit, and there's that. So anyway, enjoy and happy Halloween, and I hope you don't get egged.
Ooh, does that still happen?
I don't know. I growing up in the 90s was a lot different than it is today. I bet kids don't egg anymore. They're probably too goddamn lazy.
Now they just shoot your house.
Yeah, now they'll just dress up like a fucking clown and stand there like an idiot.
God.
Yeah, you unoriginal fucks. Go wreak some havoc, you goddamn kids. Where's your sense of mischief? Go toilet paper old man McCready's house.
Yeah, go put some food dye and dish soap in like your local pond or fountain.
Don't do it to a pond, but definitely 100% do it to a fountain.
Yeah.
You don't want to kill the pond critters. But if there's a fountain, go fucking nuts. Unless there's fish, then don't do it because you'll kill the fish. Nobody wants dead animals except for people that want dead animals, but we don't cater to those people. We don't cater to people who like to kill fish with soap suds. They're just mean-spirited. And we don't take kindly to mean-spirited people on the Whatcast.
Item number SCP-987. Object Class Euclid. Special Containment Procedures. SCP-987 is currently housed at Research Site 14 in an airtight 512 by 3 meter concrete walled chamber encased in a Faraday cage. Continuous illumination is provided by conventional fixtures in the ceiling. Access is restricted to Level 2 personnel or D-Class personnel assigned by Level 3 personnel. The chamber is to be continuously monitored remotely by thermographic and standard cameras. In the event that SCP-987-1 is not detectable by thermographic imagery, the site director and head of security are to be notified. Although it is probable that SCP-987-1 has vacated the chamber, a containment breach alert is not to be sounded by personnel on duty unless expressly authorized by the site director or head of security. Description: SCP-987 is a collection of mirrors, SCP-987-A through M, and an anomalous entity, SCP-987-1, that is only directly detectable through thermographic scans. SCP-987-1, commonly referred to as the Curator, is an endothermic area approximately 0.5 by 0.5 by 2 meters that moves at ground level. It drains heat in a radius that varies from 1 to 2 meters. It has also demonstrated the ability to manipulate objects up to 150 kilograms in mass at a distance up to 8 meters away. Objects manipulated at a distance of more than 2 meters are not subject to heat loss. Periodically, SCP-987-1 dissipates and is undetectable for periods between 15 minutes and 1.5 hours, and there has been no record of anomalous activity during these times. It has not been confirmed that SCP-987-1 actually breaches containment. When the chamber is empty of personnel, SCP-987-1 moves around in no discernible pattern, pausing in front of different mirrors for up to approximately 30 minutes each. The entity exhibits awareness of any personnel that enter the containment area and maintains a distance of at least 3 meters away. SCP-987-1 has only aggressively reacted to those who have tampered with SCP-987-A through M in any manner other than cleaning them carefully. SCP-987-A through M are mirrors of various sizes and types. 8 of them are medicine cabinets. The others are wall-mounted mirrors of various sizes and makes, the largest of which measures approximately 1.15 meters. Style and construction details indicate that all were manufactured between the 1940s and 1990s. SCP-987-A through M exhibit no anomalous characteristics other than their reflections, although exhaustive testing has been hampered by SCP-987-1. Photographic imaging and video recording show a normal mirrored surface. When viewed directly, the surface of the mirrors do not reflect an image of the room they are currently in, but rather they show a different scene, presumably of their previous location. The original locations of SCP-987-C, K, and M were identified and confirms the aforementioned theory. The reflections each show a scene of a violent death of a human subject, most commonly in a bathroom. The images are not static, but rather run as a loop lasting from 48 seconds to over 4 minutes. If viewed for 2 full cycles, the images change and the subjects become aware of the viewer as if you're looking through a window, often soundlessly pleading for help as the scenes unfold. The aggressors also occasionally interact with the viewer by making hostile gestures or writing on the surface of the mirror. On 5 occasions since 1990, SCP-987-1 has dissipated and become unobservable as noted above. In each case, a new mirror has appeared among with others as it reforms. In some cases, their mirrors were collected long after the violent incident they portray, even decades later. The latest edition, SCP-987-M, appeared 2010. Addendum Log SCP-987-2 Identified Victims. SCP-987-C Male, 62 years old. Bathroom of an upscale home in California, 1968. Victim is bound and kneeling on the bathroom floor. A young Asian woman dressed in attire suitable for a prostitute of the time enters. Victim expires due to asphyxiation. During the 3rd cycle, the aggressor usually stops at the mirror to reapply the lipstick and places a kiss mark on the glass while looking directly at the viewer. SCP-987-K Male, 34 years old. Hallway of a home in Maine, 20. Subject is standing on a ladder installing a chandelier. Subject loses balance and becomes entangled in the light fixture, pulling a length of electrical wiring from the ceiling. Subject is simultaneously electrocuted and strangled. During the 3rd cycle, the subject shows various levels of apprehension when starting the task. The incident is more gruesome in nature and usually includes the discovery of the dying subject by his wife. Note, in this case, the mirror was observed to be missing from the home when the death was discovered. It appeared at Research Site 14 at approximately the same time of the subject's demise. SCP-987-1 had dissipated at least 15 minutes before the onset of the events depicted in SCP-987-K. SCP-987-M Sarah Pussy. Female, 20 years old. Bathroom of room in the Hotel in New York City, 1978. Victim reacts in fear from an aggressor out of view and attempts to run out of the room. Unidentified male in denim jacket stabs victim once in the abdomen and flees. Victim falls to the floor and quickly expires. During the 3rd cycle, victim is clearly inebriated and attempts to communicate with the viewer before aggressor enters. After the stabbing, aggressor proceeds to Note, it is very probable, but not certain, that the presence of SCP-987-A through M is a primary factor in the containment of SCP-987-1. In light of this, any testing that may be disruptive to 987-1's behavior patterns must be approved by the site director. Note, as the Faraday shielding seems ineffective, the role played by SCP-987-1 in these incidents is uncertain. Dr. T has requested the use of a technology to attempt to contain SCP-987-1.
From the late 1930s to the 1950s, a demon ran rampant across the film industry, terrorizing its victims with venom-laced words, clenched fists, and tedious, painful sessions in the makeup chairs of countless studio backlots.
Its name was Harold Palmer. Its title, The Most Hated Man in Hollywood. You wouldn't find his name plastered alongside accolades and fun anecdotes. In fact, to everyone except those who had the misfortune of working with him, Harold Palmer was unknown. The man became a fascination of mine when my love of classic genre films led to writing for Famous Monsters of Filmland and later Fangoria, where I first learned about Palmer after asking Macy Shearer, a lead in Mountaineers from 1937, what her worst experience on set was. Sometimes, the aging stars I interviewed could barely remember the details of the films they had been a part of decades ago, but if you mention Harold Palmer, an unforgettable mixture of annoyance and frustration returned to their faces. If they didn't want to end our conversations there, I wouldn't get a story. Sometimes I debated immortalizing them, printing them in the magazines I wrote for, but I decided against it. Instead, I wove a tapestry of Palmer's life, story by story. The resultant picture disturbed me. Palmer was an understudy of Jack Pierce, the horror makeup legend responsible for crafting the now iconic looks of Universal Studios' Dracula and Frankenstein, among many others. But while Pierce stayed steadily employed with Universal for years, Palmer took his craft wherever it was needed most. Working on low-budget horrors distributed by Poverty Row Studios like Monogram and PRC, Palmer made a name for himself as someone who could provide acceptable work at a reasonable price. But this bargain came with a condition. You and your crew had to work with Harold Palmer. Loud, imposing, and spiteful, Palmer was notoriously ill-tempered and seemed to take pleasure in it. He drank constantly, abused a cocktail of whatever drugs he could find, and unleashed torrents of abuse at anyone unfortunate enough to cross his path. His constant romantic advances often turned violent when he was denied. According to Margaret Benoit, star of Highwaymen in 1943, the only reason why she was cast was because Palmer had hospitalized the previous lead, throwing her down a flight of stairs after she had rejected his demands for sex. He would pick at male stars, presumably in hopes that they would snap and take a swing. In all of my digging, I never heard of a fight that he lost. Palmer's work, especially in the horror genre, was nothing to scoff at. However, for the stars, those tedious hours of sitting in the chair were made incomparably worse, as was often the case if Palmer didn't like you. Stories of intentional branding with hot irons, assault, and the use of dangerous chemicals around the eyes and mouth were common. Dick Purcell, on the set of King of the Zombies in 1941, suffered an intense allergic reaction from the presence of egg yolk in the spirit gum used to cover his face. His crime? Taking the spot where Palmer had parked his car the previous day on set. And 13-year-old Marsha May Jones, who had an intense fear of dogs, was somehow locked in a room with Palmer's untrained cane corso for over an hour on the set of Heidi in 1937. Of course, Palmer feigned ignorance, but instead blamed the girl for riling the animal up. I've heard multitudes of tales about Palmer's unchecked behavior, from brutal assaults to torturous makeup procedures. Makes you wonder how he continued to find work, right? For one, Palmer strong-armed producers, going so far as to destroy property and threaten their loved ones if he didn't get his way. But more important were Palmer's connections. He didn't have friends exactly, but the people he fraternized with outside of work had deep pockets, tight families, and ironclad promises. They guaranteed that the consequences of Palmer's actions were overlooked, no matter how blatant or hateful they were. A rabbit hole goes immeasurably deep with Harold Palmer. Some rumors I've never been able to verify more than one account, but I believe them wholeheartedly. A clan membership, dozens of bastard children, occult ties, tales of blackmail and extortion for higher pay rates. Palmer was undeniably wicked and seemingly unaffected by this horrible reputation. But in the early 1950s, that began to change. After nearly 2 decades of consistent work, Palmer suddenly stopped. His last film was Dealers of Death in 1952, an unfinished North Star Productions picture that was intended to gauge the success of the traditional monster movie model in Technicolor, with an emphasis on special effects. The film burned its budget. The producers were reluctant to continue financing the project after box office returns for cost-friendly sci-fi proved more profitable than a headliner horror film. But it didn't matter. Palmer had stopped showing up on set weeks before production folded. Eventually, a production manager decided to check in on Palmer, given that he was on the payroll and the studio was still somewhat responsible for him. Inside his home, they found a shaken, fearful man, afraid to go outside, practically immobilized in his bed. He spoke softly, startled easily, and had seemingly aged as if he served a term in office. Something happened to Palmer, but no one could say for sure what it was. A fatal diagnosis? A bad trip? A messy falling out with his mob friends? Whatever the case, Palmer refused to work again and faded from show business entirely. Enter Martin Rocco, another individual in the entertainment industry with alleged ties to organized crime. Rocco was a leading man in numerous genre films throughout the 40s and 50s, but more importantly, served as a level-headed liaison between producers, actors, and the mob. Unlike Palmer, Rocco was respected, well-renowned, and an otherwise pleasant character to be around. He knew how to keep calm when handling business, and for that reason, he was chosen to keep an eye on Palmer. If one of their men suffers a mental break, the mob has a policy: keep them very, very close. The last thing you'd want is for someone to have a sudden change of heart and end up turning themselves in to law enforcement. And in that line of work, if one falls, they all do. So as you could imagine, someone with as many skeletons in his closet as Palmer was being kept in the crosshairs at all times. Rocco's reports on Palmer's behavior during this period described him as growing increasingly reclusive. He left home infrequently and suddenly became disinterested in women and drugs. Sometimes he'd drunkenly phone those he worked with in the past, choking on his tears as he tried to apologize for the way he treated them. Most of these calls were met with silence and then a disconnect. On the odd occasions when Rocco managed to coerce him outside the house, usually for a quick meal, Palmer was paranoid. He constantly looked over his shoulder, pointed out individuals he thought were watching him, and frequently asked about the logistics of leaving the country and starting a new life under a new name. During one of his late-night calls to Rocco, Palmer revealed he had fled his home and was driving aimlessly for hours, claiming to be constantly followed by something with wings, which never seemed to be far behind him. Palmer never spoke another word about it, no matter how hard Rocco pressed him. Soon, Palmer refused to leave the house entirely, instead electing to stay in his quote-unquote trophy room, a section of his home that housed his makeup supplies and various costumes and memorabilia from the films he had worked on over the years. It was here that Palmer spent countless hours applying and experimenting on himself with makeup, sometimes wearing a new face for weeks on end. It was as if he were trying to change who he was entirely, in hopes that he could become someone else. Rocco continued to buy him his groceries and take care of the house, and though the two rarely spoke or crossed paths, Rocco often heard Palmer sobbing to himself from his trophy room. On a legendary night in 1955, Palmer, who no one had heard from in years, sent out invitations to numerous stars and former acquaintances for a Halloween party that was to be held at his lavish home. The event was a costume-themed party and would feature a contest which encouraged guests to wear their true face through the use of makeup, promising a luxurious prize for the winner. Perhaps memories of Palmer had softened over time, or the shock of receiving any word from him, much less an invitation to his home, piqued the interest of his former co-workers. But Palmer's party was apparently well attended, with well over 100 guests. They wore horrifying, elaborate costumes. Some rented out other makeup artists, eager at the prospects of winning whatever Palmer had set aside for the contest. But while the guests dressed as traditional Halloween fixtures, Palmer himself decided on a much more confusing costume. Partygoers couldn't tell if he wore makeup or if the natural effects of aging had somehow reversed, but Palmer appeared beautiful. A youthful man with an unlined face, a full head of hair, and a charming smile. When asked about his costume, Palmer simply stated that he was sticking to the theme. At the party, Palmer spent most of his time conversing with guests one by one for extended periods. They quickly realized that his radiant appearance was just that. He acted as if he were close friends with everyone he spoke to, but his tone was erratic instead of warm, like he was going down an itinerary of beats to meet in each conversation. He frequently apologized, except he mixed up what he was apologizing for and to who. To quote the ever-witty James Mitchum, who was known for Vampire Undressed in 1940, you would have thought the sword of Damocles was replaced with a firing squad from the way he talked. By the end of the night, Palmer was frantically running across the room, trying to greet those he hadn't gotten around to earlier, and failing to glean anything resembling the goodwill he was desperately trying to find. When it came time to announce the winner of the costume contest, Palmer took the opportunity to give an extended speech. He thanked the crowd for coming, but expressed disappointment that he was the only one there who paid attention to the contest's theme. He was a compassionate, kind soul, and his appearance reflected that. Palmer talked about his past regrets and continued to assert that he had made peace with those he hurt, and that this party was proof of it. Palmer's ranting became unsteady, his body shaking as he recollected a story involving the assault of a prostitute. Tears and sweat started to stream down his face, causing his makeup to slowly drip and peel as his demands for reassurance that he was in the crowd's good graces grew louder. His white shirt became stained an off-color gray. He wiped his face, smudging the cosmetics further. No one said a word, even as he repeatedly asked the crowd if he had redeemed himself. His sadness turned to anger at their silence. He berated the crowd, asking them what more they could want from him and shaming them for taking advantage of his generosity by coming to his party. The makeup continued to break down, this time revealing what was underneath. The constant alteration and experimentation on his own skin had taken a ghoulish effect on Palmer. Underneath that youthful facade was a scarred and gaunt visage, broken out in hives and blotches, the consequences of his constant attempts to change who he was. Realizing what was happening, Palmer began to cover himself, crying. Palmer's cries for forgiveness turned to blatant insults toward the crowd as he continued to make increasingly erratic efforts to hide his face. His crazed eyes darted across the room before settling on something in the back corner, which caused him to go silent. Palmer slowly slipped from the stage, refusing to turn his back to the crowd as all color drained from his face. As he retreated into the hallway behind him, he lamented that the party wasn't enough and that it still came for him in the end. Harold Palmer disappeared that night, though the details of what happened after that speech are hazy from the witnesses. Those who ran after him said that he locked himself in his trophy room. Surrounded by the fruits of his labor, he was heard pleading to himself, claiming that he tried, but by the time Martin Rocco got the door open, Palmer was gone, with nothing left but the clothes he was wearing in a pile on the floor, clumps of cosmetics staining every surface, and a trail of makeup-caked handprints clawing the ground, begging to stay on this earth for just a bit longer.
Item number SCP-4419. Object Class Keter. Special Containment Procedures. Due to the expansive range of circumstances in which SCP-4419 manifestations occur, containment efforts are to focus on information control and post-manifestation cleanup, rather than physical imprisonment. Any witnesses to an SCP-4419 manifestation are to be dosed with a Class B or Class A amnestic as appropriate for their level of exposure. In cases where it is possible to restore the bodies of SCP-4419 victims to roughly standard human configurations, a cover story is to be established to explain any remaining damage as a result of their original injuries. In cases where this is not feasible, victims of SCP-4419 are to be brought into custody and, if possible, euthanized. A cover story is then to be established regarding the death of the victim due to their original injuries or conditions. Description: SCP-4419 is a vehicle resembling an ambulance of varying make and model, which will spontaneously appear in an area shortly before a medical emergency arises. The means by which SCP-4419 predicts these situations is currently unknown. Although the appearance of SCP-4419 differs from manifestation to manifestation, it will always resemble an ambulance appropriate for the local culture. Upon the occurrence of the medical emergency, SCP-4419 will proceed directly to the injured individual, hereafter referred to as the victim. Two individuals of varying physical appearances in paramedic uniforms will then exit from the back of SCP-4419, secure the victim, and bring them back with them into SCP-4419. The individuals that emerge from SCP-4419 will behave as expected for a medical professional in the situation, but will repel any attempt by others to prevent them from securing the victim via extreme physical force. Once the victim has been secured within SCP-4419, it will leave the area at extreme speeds, disappearing the moment it is outside of observation. 2 to 7 days later, the victim will be returned outside a local area, suffering from extreme and invasive bodily modifications. Although the majority of these alterations would logically result in death of the victim, death will not occur in these cases unless the modifications are tampered with or otherwise undone. The specific nature of these modifications differs from case to case, although there does appear to be a level of correlation with the original medical emergency. Encounter Log 4419-1. The following is a log of encounters with SCP-4419, the original medical emergencies in each case, and the bodily modifications applied to the victim. Note that this log does not encapsulate all known SCP-4419 victims, and a full record is available upon request from the data archive at Site 31. Date: 2/7/1983. Medical emergency. A braking car hits a pedestrian crossing the street, resulting in a broken leg. Bodily modification. Victim returned with all limbs amputated and relocated to protrude directly from his torso. Limbs were re-amputated, and a cover story was established to explain the loss of limbs as a result of a much more severe car accident. Date: 11/23/1994. Medical emergency. A man suffers from a broken jaw following a fight outside a bar. Bodily modification. Victim returned with his jaw forced permanently open. In addition, a glass window was installed in the mouth to permit viewing of the heart, which had been relocated to the back of the throat. Due to the relocation of the heart, reversion of the body modifications was not possible, and the victim was euthanized. Date: 6/19/1999. Medical emergency. A homeless man suffers from a drug overdose. Bodily modification. Victim returned to the same place he was originally taken from. The top of the victim's skull had been removed, and the brain crudely scooped out and placed into the victim's hands, which had been fused together in front of him. While being brought into custody, the victim's brain fell out of his hands, and he instantly expired. Date: 1/29/2003. Medical emergency. A wife and husband involved in a car crash suffer numerous broken bones and severe bleeding. Bodily modification. Victims return fused together by their backs. All bones that had been broken in the original accident were meticulously removed, resulting in a loss of use of some limbs. The victims were successfully separated, administered anesthetic as appropriate, and their modified limbs were amputated. Date: 2/15/2006. Medical emergency. An elderly man suffers from a heart attack. Bodily modification. Victim was returned with 11 additional and non-functional hearts within his body, stuffed between his existing organs. Expiration occurred when surgeons attempted to remove these additional hearts before agents could arrive on the scene. Surgeons and medical staff who had treated the victim were administered anesthetics and the body confiscated. Date: 9/19/2008. Medical emergency. A fire at a bar results in 19 people suffering from severe burns. An additional 7 people suffer from skull fractures and broken bones when they attempt to confront the individuals who emerge from SCP-4419 and are also taken as victims. It is believed existing injuries were exacerbated and new injuries caused by attempting to force 26 people into the limited space within SCP-4419. Bodily modification. Victims return to the local community center as a single watery mass, which twitches and shivers when physical contact is applied. As no method of euthanizing the victims could be found, they are currently stored in a liquid tank at Site 31. Date: 11/24/2014. Medical emergency. A U.S. military private is shot while on patrol in Afghanistan. Bodily modification. Due to the suspicious nature of SCP-4419's arrival and the forceful securing of the private, other soldiers on the patrol fire upon SCP-4419 as it leaves. Witnesses report seeing a viscous black liquid leaking from the resultant bullet holes in SCP-4419's surface. Victim is found broken down into a thin paste and spread over the walls of their barracks the next day. The agents who initially secured the remains reported seeing a mostly intact eyeball dilate when they approached. Although what has been brought into storage is referred to for convenience sake as the remains, it is currently not known whether or not the victim has expired.
SCP-004. The 12 Rusty Keys and the Door. Special Containment Procedures. When handling items SCP-004-2 through SCP-004-13, proper procedure is vital. The items are not permitted to be moved off-site unless accompanied by 2 Level 4 security personnel. Under no circumstances should any other component of SCP-004 be taken through SCP-004-1. The effects of doing so are as yet unknown, and the current cost of experimentation makes further research impractical. Should any of the objects contained within SCP-004-1 breach containment, or the facility be breached, the keys must be brought inside and the door closed prior to activation of Site-62's on-site warhead. Unauthorized removal of keys from the testing area is grounds for immediate termination. Level 1 clearance is required for basic access to SCP-004-1. Level 4 clearance is required for use of SCP-004-2 to SCP-004-13. Description: SCP-004 consists of an old wooden barn door, designated SCP-004-1, and a set of 12 rusted steel keys, designated SCP-004-2 through SCP-004-13. The door itself is an entrance to an abandoned factory in Nipple. Chronological history.
July 2nd, 1949. A group of 3 juveniles trespassing on federal property near, find the door. According to their testimony, they found a set of rusted keys in an iron lockbox and determined what door the keys unlock. The juveniles are taken into custody after they contacted Sheriff. One of the friends that we've designated SCP-004-CAS-01 goes missing. July 3rd, 1949. Local authorities find the severed right hand of SCP-004-CAS-01 8 kilometers from SCP-004-1. Other parts of SCP-004-CAS-01's body are found scattered as far away as 32 kilometers from the factory. Under interrogation, the apprehended juveniles tell authorities that upon opening the door with one of the keys, SCP-004-CAS-01 was torn into several pieces, each of which disappeared. At this point, the SCP Foundation is taking over the investigation. July 4th, 1949. SCP Agent obtains the keys from the local authorities to begin testing. The initial tests show that SCP-004-2 through SCP-004-13 all fit into a single lock on the large barred door. We've brought in 12 Class D personnel, and they're assigned to test the effects of the door. Of the 12 test subjects, each trying a different key to enter the room. There were only 2 that survived, opening the door with any key except SCP-004-7 or SCP-004-12 caused the test subjects to be torn apart in multiple directions. However, no dismembered parts were found until later. At the time of this recording, only 2 parts of each subject have been recovered. with the exception of the subject using SCP-004-. His pieces were scattered in close proximity. The others, for all intents and purposes, have vanished from existence. Of the two surviving subjects, only one, having used SCP-004-7, returned unharmed. The other came back in a near catatonic state, able only to remove himself from the room, and then he collapsed to the floor, and we had to restrain him to prevent him from gouging out his eyes. The subject using SCP-004-7, he said that he had entered a large room. In fact, it was impossibly big for the size of the attached building. And after his exit, SCP-004-1 was propped open, and an armed squad of Level 3 personnel entered at that point. The size of the room is impossible to measure, and the door frame and the individuals in the room are the only part of the room that can be felt or illuminated. July 16th, 1949, the juvenile suspects and sheriff are terminated. August 12th, 1949 is declared a hazardous area due to an unexploded ordnance, and fences have been erected in order to prevent civilian ingress. Tests to determine the safety of exposure to environment behind SCP-004-1 are about to begin. December 1st, 1950. Space-time anomalies resulting from exposure to SCP-004 have been confirmed. Testing is going to be suspended until further notice. July 2nd, 1960. The unaccounted for remains of SCP-004 CAS-01 appear unexpectedly outside SCP-004-1. Despite being killed decades before, the remains of SCP-004 CAS-01 are not decomposed in any manner. In fact, they're still warm to the touch. The blood remains uncoagulated. The remains are remanded for testing. July 4th, 1960. The unaccounted for remains of one of the 12 original test subjects appear in similar manner to those of SCP-004 CAS-01. The remains have been designated SCP-004 CAS-02. Records suggest that both SCP-004 CAS-01 and CAS-02 used SCP-004- March 21st, 1999. With the massive proliferation of nuclear weapons and World War III only years away, construction has begun on site inside SCP-004-1. The site is to stock supplies for person days. April 24th, 1999. Captain has ordered the site inside SCP-004-1 to be expanded to include emergency storage for all mobile SCP specimens and a petabyte database for the storage of all SCP data. The facility is now referred to as Site 62. September 25th, 2000. Site 62 is operational. The labs and containment units are complete and can contain the most dangerous specimens. The backup of SCP database has begun at this time. January 25th, 2001. Due to time anomalies, all personnel working on Site 62 are now required to reside on site permanently. families of personnel are to be informed that loved ones perished in an industrial accident. We've cloned bodies and they've been prepared for the funerals. August 14th, 2003. Massive power outages across the northeast United States and through Canada. Due to the initial failure of multiple SCP generators, Site 62 was without power for 53 minutes. During those 53 minutes, it was reported that those on site were completely without any source of light. They reported sensing creatures and people, although no abnormal entities could be seen or felt. Selected facility personnel were allowed to read and said the creatures sensed were of humanoid size, but otherwise similar to the massive green creature described.
Space and time anomalies. SCP-004 seems to propagate spatiotemporal anomalies. Personnel leaving the facility report losing time. Those who have been in the site for weeks insist that they had only been in the facility for several days, and records of work completed and supplies consumed support their claims. Other temporal anomalies involve SCP-004-2 through SCP-004-13, especially the reappearance of SCP-004-CAS-01 and SCP-004-CAS-02 exactly 4 years after using SCP-004-, has been assigned to investigate all aspects of these time anomalies. Spatial anomalies include the impossibly large dimensions of the area opened by SCP-004-7. Similarly, the 2003 blackout incident suggests that there exists an alternate plane of existence within the same space that Site-62 occupies. Additional notes. Testing on SCP-004 reveals that 10 of the keys open SCP-004-1 on a dimension where the laws of physics and topology are significantly different than those of our own home dimension. Test subjects meeting these hostile conditions are torn apart, their body parts deposited in various locations, only 3 of which have been verified to be on Earth. Material deposited at 2 of these points appears immediately. Material deposited at the 3rd appears exactly years into the future. The other 7 locations are currently unknown. Current testing focuses on 2 avenues of research. The first is finding ways to survive SCP-004 hostile topologies. The second suggests that SCP-004-2 through 13 may open doors other than SCP-004-1. Appendix A. Mental health effects of SCP-004-12. All Class D personnel using SCP-004-12 return in a catatonic state, unable to speak. Some may have enough energy left to try to claw out their eyes. Of the 16 subjects, only 4 have survived. Only 1 has regained speech following long-term psychotherapy. He was able to tell the psychiatrist that he saw a massive green creature, so large that much of its body extended beyond his field of view. He reported innate fear and sudden recognition, as if it were something buried deep in his primal fears, and forced implementation of incomprehensible memories. Subject displays acute anterograde and retrograde amnesia. Appendix B. Additional information. Item number SCP-004-14. Date of discovery: September 2nd, 1950. Origin of the object. Object was discovered elsewhere in factory area in the previously undiscovered manager's office. Description: Object appears as a large, unvarnished wooden box. The box may be unlocked by the safe key, designated SCP-004-7, as well as 5 of the unsafe keys. See document SCP-004-1. Upon unlocking SCP-004-14 with SCP-004-7, the box opens automatically on hinges. The volume of space inside is precisely 5 times greater than the outer dimensions imply. Items placed within while the lid remains open do not affect the weight or any other properties of the box. When the lid is closed and locked, however, all items inside vanish irretrievably. Personnel locked inside the box are also irretrievable, although losing personnel in this fashion appears to affect significantly the dreams experienced by
Well, there you have it, folks. Happy Halloween. We hope you stay safe.
Make sure you check your kids' candy. You don't want them eating razor blades or tripping on acid.
Yeah, that stuff's never happened. Remember, we covered that. Yeah.
I know. God, Mateo. Fucking ruin everything. God. Halloween's ruined. Just go back and delete this entire episode. No more Halloween. We're done.
I wanted them to fear for their children's lives.
Yeah, I did. And you ruined it. Now no one's going to be afraid of trick-or-treating anymore. Man, took all the fun out of Halloween. I'm not celebrating anymore.